All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're doing something a bit different. We are going to strictly catalog the physical details and the deeply unsettling events of the most famous reported alien encounters. We're totally stripping away the endless debates about what's real and what's not, because we're not trying to prove or disprove anything here. Instead, we're focusing entirely on what the witnesses claim actually happened to them. We're going to map out the anatomy of a close encounter step by step, focusing really heavily on those reported physical interactions with these entities. We start with this totally frantic realization from 1976. Just imagine being in a canoe out in the pitch black Maine wilderness. Holy shit, this is it. We'll never get away. That was the exact thought flashing through Jack Wiener's mind as a massive, glowing, completely soundless object hovered right over the water, beaming this brilliant light directly at him and his three friends. It just plunges us right into that overwhelming, sudden reality of coming face to face with the absolute unknown. I mean, there is literally nowhere to run. So, phase one, the moment of capture. Let's look at exactly how these subjects are supposedly taken from their environments. You know, witnesses across the decades often describe two really distinct, highly effective methods of capture. In cases like Allagash, victims described being basically levitated by a glowing, hollow tube of light that felt, well, almost liquid. But then, in stark contrast, during the Pascagoula incident, fishermen described this invisible, paralyzing force that just floated their completely rigid bodies right through the air and into the craft. They couldn't move a single muscle, but they were entirely awake the whole time. Wild, right? Moving on to phase two, cataloging the alien entities. Once captured, what exactly are these witnesses looking at? Well, the most commonly reported entity is the gray variant. You've probably heard of this one from the Allagash incident or the famous Betty and Barney Hill Zeta Reticuli case. Witnesses consistently describe these small, really fragile-looking beings that show absolutely zero emotion. They have these oversized bald heads, penetrating dark, lidless eyes, pale skin, and hands with just 4 fingers. And here's the crazy part. Despite looking physically way weaker than a human, they somehow exert this complete, effortless physical control over their captives. But hey, not all beings are grays. The Pascagoula witnesses describe something utterly bizarre. Creatures with thick, wrinkled, almost elephant-like skin, slit mouths, and literally crab-like claws for hands. They moved in this robotic, hovering kind of way and didn't even appear to breathe. Meanwhile, the infamous Flatwoods encounter in West Virginia, that involved a hovering 10-foot-tall giant shrouded in a diamond-shaped hood, and it emitted this toxic metallic mustard gas odor that caused severe nausea in anyone who got anywhere near it. And, this brilliantly illustrates the sheer diversity of these accounts. It really reminds us that this phenomenon isn't just one single, uniform experience. Take the famous aerial school sighting in Zimbabwe. Over 60 schoolchildren detailed seeing tiny beings, only about 3 feet tall, but get this, they had long black hair and massive rugby ball-shaped eyes. They were just in tight black suits, just darting around the edge of the school playground. Okay, phase 3. Inside the examination rooms. Once inside the craft, the reports pivot to some deeply, deeply unsettling medical interactions. Even the environments themselves are really striking in how different they are. The Allagash witnesses recalled a space that felt distinctly like a cold, sterile doctor's office, all lit up by this diffuse, shadowless white light. But then you have contactee Betty Andreasen, who describes something vastly different. She reported an architectural marvel made of soaring glass walls, immense light forces, and a complex maze of doors that honestly defied earthly physics. Take a look at this remarkable sketch. It was drawn directly by Charlie Foltz, one of the Allagash witnesses. Because the men involved were actually art students, they were able to accurately render their terrifying recall under hypnosis. This sketch perfectly anchors our understanding of that clinical, terrifying layout of the examination room. It shows his friends totally stripped down, waiting helplessly on a bench, while these entities just stand right over an examination table. Through all these accounts, we see a highly procedural, almost industrialized operation unfold. It's like a bizarre assembly line. Step 1, subjects are stripped completely naked. Step 2, they're placed on a plastic-like bench or a cold, silvery table. Step 3, they get restrained, sometimes by physical harnesses, but very often by that invisible, paralyzing force we talked about. And finally, step 4, biological samples are systematically harvested. Witnesses report the entities taking skin scrapings, blood, saliva, and other fluids with just this chilling, cold precision. And the tools used during these exams, They are consistently described as strange but highly advanced. Witnesses recall these pencil-sized rods with illuminated tips that are used to probe the eyes and mouth. They describe massive shield-like contraptions used to scan their paralyzed bodies, handheld scraping instruments, and heavy, hovering machine-like devices that are literally lowered directly over the subject's chest to perform, well, unknown functions. Just try to imagine that for a second. Being completely paralyzed, fully conscious, while the heavy, hovering machine is lowered directly onto your chest. All right, phase 4, telepathic messages and warnings. During these exams, an eerie kind of communication occurs. But the thing is, it is almost never verbal.
The communication is almost entirely telepathic. Like Jack Weiner recounted, the entities project these commanding thoughts directly into the witnesses' minds. Do not be afraid. Do what we say. It's basically a form of extreme psychological suppression. It's designed to keep the captives compliant, calm, and utterly under control while the procedures are taking place.
Yet, the messaging isn't always just about crowd control. In cases like the Ariel School, the telepathic messages shift from immediate commands to ominous environmental warnings. The children reported that just by making intense, direct eye contact with the beings, thoughts were actually placed into their heads. Thoughts warning them that mankind's technology and pollution were actively destroying the planet. Which brings us to phase 5, the return and missing time. Finally, we reach the conclusion of the encounter. The timeline of these events almost always features massive gaps in the witness's conscious memory. Let's look at the Allagash timeline as an example. At 9 p.m., a glowing orb approaches. At 9:05, they are completely engulfed in that light beam. And then, just a void. The next thing they actually consciously remember, it's 11 p.m. They're suddenly back in their canoes. That massive bonfire they had just built on the shore, the one meant to last for hours, has been reduced to cold ashes. What felt like mere seconds to them was actually 2 whole hours of missing time.
And the aftermath? It is definitely not just psychological. It leaves harrowing physical marks. Jack Weiner actually found a surgical, biopsy-like scoop mark on his ankle, along with anomalous lumps on his leg. Stefan Michalak at Falcon Lake, he suffered scorching geometrical grid burns right on his chest, dramatic weight loss, and suddenly dropping lymphocyte levels in his blood. And across almost all of these cases, the witnesses endure intense, recurring nightly trauma and nightmares that often take years to even begin consciously unpacking.
So, as we wrap up this detailed catalog of reported events, looking purely at the mechanics, the physical descriptions, and these deeply invasive procedures, we are left to ponder the sheer consistency and trauma of these accounts. Regardless of where you personally stand on the whole UFO debate, the anatomy of these encounters leaves us with a chilling question. What truly happens when we are pulled into the dark? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.